This program is being provided by the 15 members of the Vancouver Educational Telecommunications Consortium, TV, etc.
Good morning again. My name is Theo, Mikaele. I've been a DRO for about 6 years in the district now. I'm very passionate about working with young kids. I just want to commend all you parents for coming out. I had the opportunity to have a conversation with one of the parents last night at the dinner we had last night. And, we had a pretty good conversation. She was speaking about how for the longest time she didn't know what to do with her son. She didn't have any answers, and thankfully she was able to connect with some community members, Miss Mikaele and Miss Kelly, to help her out. And I was assuring her that you are not alone. There are people out there that want to help you out, and she was able to be open to some of the conversations that we had. So thanks a lot for getting involved with your kids' lives. So Victor kind of broke it down, and it's almost like we worked things out. I was debating whether or not I was going to break down the foundation of what a gang is and the initiation process, and I didn't do it, so thankfully he already touched on that. So now that he touched on that, I'm just going to go ahead and speak as far as from the schools, what we're seeing in the schools, the different gangs that we're seeing within our schools, and then show you a couple pictures of different indicators of what to look out for. So I'm going to start off by talking a little bit about the Serenios. This is probably the largest group of gang activity that we are seeing in our schools. Serenios is Spanish for Southerner. The Serenios fall under the umbrella of the Mexican Mafia, also known as La M. It's kind of like an umbrella. They're controlled by the Mexican Mafia. Mexican Mafia is the prison gang. And then the street gang is the Serenios, and then within the Serenios there's different sets within Serenios, and some of the different sets we have here locally are SSL, Southside Local, MVS, Mexican Vatos, Serenios, SUL for Serenios Unlocked, and there's a whole different list, but those are just some of the ones that we've seen a lot of activities within our schools. They generally claim the color blue from the issue bandana in the California prison system, and they claim the number 13. The reason why they claim the number 13 is the 13th is M is the 13th letter in the alphabet. They associate with the letters M and S. And when you're looking through your son or daughter's schoolwork, and I say son and daughter, we are starting to see a lot more females involved with the gangs. So when you're looking through your son or daughter's schoolwork, look for signs like Sir, the number 13, X Roman numeral, X3, or M. And also when you're looking through their schoolwork, just a different mantra. If you see a name on there that doesn't, like Rick said earlier, Joker, I don't know what name he said earlier, but if you're seeing a name that's not your son or daughter's name on there, start to ask some questions, connect with people who have some gang knowledge so that we can start figuring some of this stuff out. Usually within their graffiti, they abbreviate for their names in graffiti, such as SSL for Southside Locals. Here's a couple. I got a couple pictures here for different indicators that we have. These are what we're seeing in our schools. We're seeing. I know Victor talked about the gloves earlier. When they're wearing their gloves, it's kind of like they're fighting gloves. And then what I want you to pay attention. This is a true story. I was giving a presentation to a staff about a month ago, and I mentioned something about. I didn't have this picture, but I was mentioning something about kids wearing gloves, and a teacher said out loud, she says, "Oh, that Johnny, I'm going to call his mom. I seen him wearing gloves the other day." No, don't misinterpret. Just because the gloves, that doesn't mean necessarily they're involved in gangs. Okay, let's look for different indicators. This is a perfect indicator right here. He has the gloves. He has the X3 on there. That's an indicator that he might have some gang affiliation. Then Victor also talked, this is awesome. He did all the way. Oh, he also talked about the belts. We see these a lot. These are the military style canvas belts the kids are wearing. These belt buckles, you can change these belt buckles out. With the Serenios, they'll have the 13. Sometimes they'll change them out to have the letter M for Mexican Mafia. Sometimes they'll have an S. The funny thing about the 13, working in the schools, I've heard them all. The kids will tell us, said, hey, Johnny, why do you got 13 on your schoolwork? Oh, I just turned 13 yesterday. No, there's other, and he also has other indicators that he's gang affiliated. So they try to tell all the stories, but I encourage you to look at all the different indicators when looking through your kids' schoolwork. Here's another picture of different indicators. This student has a glove, has a blue bandana. And then you guys can't see, but he has glasses right now that say south on one side, or south on one side, side on the other side. So for south side. And then I talked about the SUL. That's a local set we have here. And then the X3. That was taken off the student's phone here in the schools. Bunch of indicators. It's got brass knuckles, blue bandana, and then the blue and white Converse. Some I just saw recently with the Serenios also is different indicators you're looking at with the eyebrows. There was a student a couple months ago, he had one cut in one eye and 3 cuts on the other eyebrow. So that's one indicator to look out for. Also with the females, they'll tend to braid their hair, maybe 13 braids. Look for those different indicators. And then also the colors that they have on their beads. That's the Serenios. We're going to talk about the Norteños. Norteños are the all-time rivalries of the Serenios. And with the Norteños, again, the prison gang, they're controlled by the Nuestra Familia. Nuestra Familia is the prison gang. And then underneath that is the Norteños. And then below the Norteños are different sets. Norteños generally claim the color red. Their number is 14, and it's because N is the 14th letter of the alphabet. They often associate themselves with the letter N. In their graffiti and paraphernalia, they will use Norte or XIV, the X4, number 14, or NA. And they too tend to abbreviate when they do their graffiti work. This is an example, RVN for Rosemere Barrio Norteña.
What does that mean?
Norteña is female gang. This group is also, this group is the Rosemere area over kind of Washington. Washington is kind of their territory. Washington Elementary School. IGA. This was taken off of one of our students' binders. This says Norte right in the front. On that picture over there, North for Norteño, 14. North side, XIV. And then the scrap. Scrap is a derogatory term that is used towards the Norteños. And then you see there's 4 dots in the top right corner. That's another indicator that they use in their graffiti. Then again, here's the military style belt that we've talked about. And sometimes on the end of their belts, they hang their belts. You want to, if you're looking at your son or daughter's belts, look at the end of their belts. They sometimes put their monikers on the end when they hang them. This was at one of our schools. It says Norte as the number 14 and XIV. There's a question. Sorry. Sorry, I said moniker. Moniker is kind of like a street name, what their street name is. Or their gang name. We're kind of moving along here. I'm covering all the groups so that we have time for Marcia to cover. Bloods, we've seen some blood. some blood work around here. They generally claim the color red, and they're primarily African American. We've seen some local Asian blood gangs here. The Bloods was formed initially to compete against the influence of the Crips, which I'll talk about the Crips a little bit after this. And typically they cross out the C's in their schoolwork or graffiti to disrespect the Crips. So when you're looking through your students' work, you see the C's crossed out throughout the whole their whole assignment. Start asking questions why they're crossing the C's out. They commonly refer to themselves as CKs. CKs for the Crip Killers. And then locally here in Vancouver, there are more supporters than there are members. And what I mean by supporters are there are more students who like to wear the colors and wear the clothing of the Bloods, but haven't really gone through the jump-in process or the initiation process. Couple indicators. Can anybody read what gang hand sign this is? Well, this says blood, the B-L-O-O-D. Bloods throw up a lot of gang sign. I can't do all that gang stuff like Victor did earlier, but that's the way that they communicate towards their robberies. They often like to use the sports gears. B for Boston Red Sox, they like to use the Chicago Bulls. And then here's another. All this stuff that we're showing right now is stuff that was taken off of students at our schools. So these are different indicators that we want to pay attention to. This was in the student's phone, CK, the red bandana, CK for Crip Killer. And then again, the red bandana. Now we'll talk about the Crips. The Crips, again, like I said, is the all-time robberies of the Bloods. Locally, we have not seen very many Crips. We just recently came across a group called the Fourth Plane Crips. This is a group of 4 white brothers that decided to form a gang. So that's the most recent we've seen. There's lots of different elsewhere, but as far as here in Vancouver and across the water in Portland, there's more Crip influence over there. But as far as here, not as much that we've seen in the schools. So they generally claim the color blue, and they're under the Crip Alliance are mainly identified by color blue, which is worn proudly by all Crip members as the primary color. Again, they're primarily African American, with the exception of our Fourth Plane Crips that we have here. And then with the Crips, they typically cross out the B's in their schoolwork or graffiti. I have Trey here. Trey's going to come and demonstrate the sea walk. Everybody familiar? I'm just kidding, Trey. Everybody familiar with Snoop Dogg? Snoop Dogg has a lot of Crip influence. He's a big-time rapper out of California, but again, these are some of the role models that some of our kids are seeing. So be aware when they're listening to different music or they have role models like this guy, start asking questions. And then here's 213. This was also taken off of another student from our school. 213 Watts is a Crip gang that we do not have here. They are sort of emulating, and they see it on the internet or whatever, and they want to put it on their phones. And then Mr. Snoopy is a gang name. Then right here we have another picture with a blue bandana. You can't see the writing here, but it says C's up and B's down. And then right here, this is actually one of the Fourth Plane Crip kids. Took this off of him. You can see he's wearing the blue Dickies, blue and white Converse, has a blue bandana hanging from his pocket. Those are indicators. And then he's stomping on a red bandana to disrespect the Bloods. This is the last one that we're seeing. We're seeing some of the Juggalo influence in our schools. Juggalos are there. It's a name given to fans or insane clown posse. And with the Juggalos, typically they are Caucasian kids, and we've just seen a lot of tagging, graffiti work on the schools. Haven't seen very many kids come in with Juggalo graffiti or whatnot. But we did have a student that came in with this coat. We banned these coats. This coat we ban all. So if you're looking to buy your kids sweaters or whatever, we do not allow this in the Vancouver schools. It has the hatchet man, which the hatchet man is an indicator for the Juggalos. Then there again is another indicator, the hatchet man. And then you can't see any of the writing here, but this was a backpack that was taken off of one of our students. It has ICP, there's a drawing of hatchet man in there. And then again, the hatchet man on the back of that coat.
What is ICP?
ICP stands for Insane Clown Posse. Just a couple parent tips for all you parents. Get to know your son or daughter's friends. Know where they're at. Be involved with the schools and all that we talk about. What clothes are they wearing? And why they're wearing those clothes? Why does Johnny always want Southside jerseys with the number 13? Start paying attention to some of that. And while you're working with some of your kids, what we like to focus on is not labeling kids as gang members, but gang affected. And like Victor said earlier, they're not labeled the gang members until they've gone through the court process. So look for some of these different indicators. I know it went by kind of fast, but I was able to show you some of the pictures that you want to look for, and start asking the questions, your son and daughters, and ask them why. Why are you labeling your schoolwork Joker or loony? You know, start getting involved and asking questions when you see some of those indicators. Monitor their computer use. MySpace and Facebook has been a big time problem within our schools. Kids tend to put their gang information on there as a sign of intimidation towards all the other gangs. So that's try to monitor what your kids are doing and what sites, the social networking sites that they're involved with. Check the backpacks in room. We've showed some pictures of some of the backpacks that had some of the different indicators and gang writings on them. So be aware. Go every once in a while. Go through some of your kids' folders. Look for those names that we've talked about, or just a name that's not their name, and start asking questions. Know what your kids are doing and where, and get involved in their schools. That's my part. Thank you, Marshall.
Okay, what I'm going to talk about today is kind of how to interact with the police. If your child or your kid gets contacted by the police and you have questions, I think questions are good to ask. It's good to find out why your child is contacted by the police. So when you're dealing with the police, obviously you're dealing with the government. The government is difficult to deal with. It's hard to get through the phone trees. It's hard to figure out, what officer contacted my child and how all of that works. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I want to thank Victor for coming up. I've worked gangs for a long time. It's very interesting as you travel around the country or people come to us. It's all the same, okay? Doesn't matter if you're white, black, Hispanic, Asian, American Indian, doesn't matter. It's all the same out there as far as the general indicators, the conduct, and things like that. The thing that Victor's telling us is going on in Houston is no different than what's going on here. The indicators they're seeing in Houston is exactly what we're seeing here. Now, they have different names for some of their gang sets. A gang set is essentially you have the gangs that Theo talked about, and they're broken down into essentially like teams. And that's what a gang set is. It's a broad gang that's broken down into neighborhoods that are called sets. If you have sets that have many different teams underneath those can be called cliques. So it's important to understand that, well, Victor's from Houston. That's not here. Which in reality is not true at all, because it is here. And so by admitting it and talking about it and communicating on all fronts, then we start being able to defeat the problem and prevent the problem. Okay, it's interesting if you start looking at gang history. In the 1920s, Los Angeles, the gang capital of the world, right? They said we don't have a gang problem. They said Chicago. They said New York have gang problems, not us. By 1945, and you start progressing in that direction, gangs are exploding in LA, and they realize, wow, we do have a gang problem. The problem with history is we continually repeat ourselves, and so the number one thing is you all are here today getting somewhat educated, asking questions, and kind of you can develop a plan so you can attack this. So this is all good, and again, thank you, Victor, for coming up. Communication is important, and it has to be communication on all fronts. So, I put this slide together to kind of show traditionally how things work. You got the police, you got the family, you got the community being schools, social programs, different things like that. Well, they're all different entities. Nobody's talking. The police contact my child tells me, hey, police contacted me. I wasn't doing anything, just hanging out. They were really mean to me. They violated my rights. They did all these things. Well, as a parent, you're protective of your kid and you're upset. Now you're upset with the police based on one side of the story that your kid is telling you that might not be exactly accurate. And so that creates some hostility for you and your child against the police. And then your kid goes to school and gets expelled from school. If you're not an interactive parent, then you're not asking the school the questions on, hey, what's my kid doing? And so now you're upset with the school. And the school's upset with you because this parent doesn't even care. So it's just this cycle of everybody's living in their own little circle and nobody's communicating, okay? So that's kind of what it needs to look like. It needs to look like we're all on the same page. We're all on the same team. We have this problem out here, in this case, gangs, and we're trying to deal with it. And so we're all talking. And you know what? If you ask me a question as a police officer and I say, yeah, this is what I did, well, then you have your kid's story, you have my side, and you can evaluate that based on common sense and, intelligence. If you don't ask the questions, you're really not going to be able to get the answer. So I encourage you, and part of this presentation today is not just, hey, this is what a gang looks like. This is, hey, I need to understand the police a little bit. What do the police do? What are some things that I can do? And what are some phone numbers that I can call when I have questions? So, first off, let me explain how your kid's going to get contacted by the police and some of the reasons. All right? First off, if there's a large group or, 3, 4, 5 kids hanging around on the street corner, walking around, don't really seem to have a purpose, or walking with purpose, it doesn't matter, and they're all showing some gang indicators, you got 2 or 3 with a blue bandana, you got, another 2 with a blue shirt, some of these other indicators that are talked about, and they're moving around, they're hanging out in a park, whatever, chances are they're going to get contacted by the police, okay? If there's no crime, it's called a social contact. And what that is the police are just going, hey, what are y'all doing here? What's going on? Again, part of the police's job is suppression, not just enforcement. Enforcement is, hey, you committed a crime, I'm going to enforce on you, I'm going to write you a ticket, I'm going to arrest you, I'm going to put you in jail, I'm going to cite you into court, those kind of things. The suppression aspect of our job is we want to, hey, here's a high crime area, here's a high gang activity area. We're going to go out and we're going to make contacts so that people don't hang around here and commit the crimes. So part of that is, especially in the gang world, we have to know who's who. We have to know who Snoopy is. We have to know who Joker is. We have to know what gangs are hanging out here. When you pull up this morning right across the street, you see SSL graffiti on the fence. You go down another couple apartment complexes, great big Norteño graffiti. So as a police, we have to know that. So that's why we ask those questions. It would not be, I guess, very efficient of us if we don't ask the questions of who are you? You know, are you a gang member? Regardless of how it's phrased, that's our job. We need to know who is who. So, the social contact, we're going to contact groups like that. It might just be a routine traffic stop or some other violation that's observed. You know, maybe we have a problem of pedestrians getting hit by cars. And so the first thing the police look at as well, is there a crosswalk there? You know, is there speed control? You know, notifiers that it's a pedestrian crossing. What's going on there? So you start looking for people that are jaywalking. Okay, well, the police stopped me for crossing the street. Well, yeah, on one hand, that's, you know, kind of petty, maybe it seems, but there could be a bigger picture there. So you say your kid gets stopped, he's upset, he's crossing the street. Hey, I got stopped, I got this ticket. Or they question me, you know, for 10 minutes and then let me go. Well, call them up. Call up the police officer, say, hey, why did you stop my son? Well, then you find out, you know what, we're doing enforcement in this area for jaywalking because there's been pedestrians hit or something along those lines. There's a lot of different reasons why your child could get stopped, and, you know, and essentially in their mind they're being detained and that kind of thing. So again, ask the questions. You might have an apartment complex. You might have the, you know, the neighborhood busybody that sees people out in the apartment complex. They call, 911 call. What happens? Police go. They see what's going on. So some of it is proactive work by the police. They're going to go out and see who's hanging around. Some of it's reported by neighbors. Some of it is an existing violation that's going to be stopped. But there's rules that the police have to operate in. And, you know, I've never sat in a shift brief. And shift brief is, you know, when I go to work, we all sit around a table, we get the crime flyers, we get notified on what happened the shift before, and we kind of get, you know, problem areas that we're supposed to go out and take a look at. I've never heard my sergeant say, you know, let's go out and violate somebody's rights. Right? That's not the plan when we go to work. So, you know, our intent when we go out there is to do our job, and by doing that job, we end up making contacts. So, I guess my point with all of that is there's going to be a reason your child was contacted by the police. And in my experience, it's not because the police set forth on their duty day to go violate somebody's rights. Okay, there's a reason. And so if you're not getting it from your child, then call and find out what that reason is. So I'm going to kind of walk you through some things to do so you can educate yourself on why this contact took place. The first thing is you got to ask your kid, right? And you got to ask the tough questions. It can't just be, hey, Mom, Dad, please stop me. No reason. Violated me. I wasn't doing anything. And then, you know, sent me on my way. I don't even know what was going on. Well, here's some questions that I put together, and there's a lot more. You all are very intelligent people. You're sitting here. You're already asking questions. That's what brought you here today, right? So, do your own little investigation. You know your kid. You know those little quirks when they start lying to you or when they're being honest with you. So ask them, who are you with? You know, we've heard from several different people this morning. Know who your kids' friends are. Know who they're hanging out with. Maybe your kid isn't the gang member, but maybe they're with the gang member. And maybe it wasn't your kid that caught the police's attention. Maybe it was the kid they were with. Okay? So, not guilt by association, but certainly contact by associations happen. So, keep those things in mind. Ask that. What were you doing? Well, we're just chilling on the corner. Okay? Well, what happens when you get a bunch of people or a bunch of kids flamed up, which is slang for norteños. They wear red. When they're all redded out standing on the corner. You got 3 or 4 of those guys standing on the corner, they're going to get contacted. We should contact them as the police because we're trying to keep the community safe. And gangs, by definition, are a criminal entity. Okay? It doesn't say you're a gang, you're just a group of guys hanging out, okay? You're a group of people hanging out who ultimately commit crimes together. So we look for indicators and then we make those contacts. So what are you doing? Well, we're just hanging out on the corner, okay? Well, what were you wearing? You know, when your kid's telling you this, are they all blued up? You know, do they have the Hatchet Man jerseys on? You know, do they have their black stormtrooper boots with the red laces and the 88 on their shirt? You know, and the Nazi symbol written on them? Okay? When you start seeing those things, that's why the indicators are important. You can ask the questions, hey, what does this mean? You know, is that what you were wearing when you were contacted? Oh, all your friends were wearing the same thing. Those kind of things. You know, where things yell. It's very common for these guys to stand on the corner and yell stuff out. You know, Norteños will call out scrap to passing people that they suspect to be Sureños. Again, remember that's a derogatory term for Sureños. Sureños will throw out nor puto. Okay? All kinds of different slangs get thrown out. You know, juggalos, remember the ICP guys, they stand in the corner and they go whoop whoop. You know, that's a greeting. Those kind of things, you might not know what they mean, but the other people that live in the gang subculture, they know what that means. And so then, now the posturing starts. Now now I'm going to throw my hand sign back. So again, it's important. Find out exactly what was going on from your child. Maybe they tell you, maybe they don't. Maybe they minimize, maybe they tell you. Okay? But it's important that you ask the question so you can compare that against, when you talk to the officer that stopped your child, so you can get, both sides of what happened. It's important to know where they were at. You know, what time of day was it? You got the dark corner. We have a cul-de-sac over here that it's a private road. It's kind of weird because it's a private road, so the city doesn't want to put a street light in there. But it's got these like duplexes, and at nighttime it gets pitch black, and the people that have moved into those duplexes end up having huge gatherings on this little dark road. Well, as a police department, we're having fights, we're having shootings, we're having drug dealing come out of that little cul-de-sac. So you're standing around in there in the dark, after hours, you're going to get contacted. All right? So that's something that the police could tell you when you call them. But again, what time of day was it? Where were you at? That's going to help the officer be able to converse with you intelligently and pick that contact out of the 50 others he's made since that time. Something else. How long were you stopped for? Your basic general contact, really 10 to 15 to 20 minutes maybe, depending upon, what's being looked at. If you start getting some indicators of additional crimes or, a little investigation starting, it may stretch out longer. But it's important if your kid says, hey, I was stopped for an hour, I was stopped for 2 hours, now you're looking at either something was really serious going on or, maybe they were stopped for too long. But that's something you're not going to know until you talk to the officer. Okay? How many police officers were there? Man, they rolled up deep on me. There was like 10 cops. They had their lights going. Some of them had their guns out. Well, that's not your normal stop that the police make on you. So again, there's a reason for that. Remember, we have to operate within a law, but within the law for protection of the police, we can have what is called officer safety. So, multiple officers will make contacts. Sometimes guns are out. When you're dealing with the gang population, it's considered a high-risk population, and there are definitely safety concerns that come with it. So, it's not surprising that police ask gang members to step out of the car. Okay? Weapons can be hidden in the car. Okay? Clothing and styles for gang members oftentimes is big, baggy clothing. Okay? Weapons can be hid in waistbands, all different kinds of places on the person. It's not uncommon for safety purposes to be patted down. Okay? It's not disrespect. It's not trying to be a racist. It's not, trying to be on a power trip. In reality, what it is I just want to make sure it's safe when I'm standing here and talking to you and figuring out what is going on. Okay? That's part of my job, to protect the community, but also I need to protect myself along with that. So when you start hearing these things, put yourself a little bit in the officer's position and start thinking about, it's midnight, it's dark, it's in kind of a secluded area. Well, Mom, I was behind Walmart. Yeah, there were 3 or 4 of us back there. We were just kicking it. We were just chilling. And there was a single officer that came up, and he was really rude. He told me to show me, show him my hands. He made me sit on the curb and cross my feet and have my hands on the back of my head. Well, if you start thinking about, well, there's a lone officer, midnight, dark, secluded area, dealing with multiple people who are showing gang identifiers, there's some reasons that you can think, well, that kind of makes sense. Now, it's your kid, and so you want to be protective of your child, which is, you can factor that in. But again, all we ask is that you kind of factor in how we have to do our job and still be able to go home. But anyway, so you ask these questions, you get some background. So when you call the officer, which I think is always the first step, as far as, first step is talking to your kid, but the first step in the system of finding out what happened after getting your child's story is getting a hold of the officer. Okay? So, yes?
There's a question. How do the parent know that police stopped the child?
Okay.
And also, how do they contact police and find out what happened?
Okay, 2-part question. First one is, how do you know your kid was contacted by the police? Well, you might not unless your kid tells you, or unless they get a subpoena to court. They'll get cited into juvenile court, or they come home with a ticket and say, "Hey, Mom, Dad, can you pay this for me?" So there is no notification oftentimes by the police that your kid was contacted. There are times when that happens, when you'll get the midnight phone call and say, "Hey, I have your daughter out here. She's supposed to be out, at 2 in the morning with these guys." So sometimes you'll get those calls, but most of the time it's your kid telling you he or she was contacted by the police. The second part of that question is, how do we get a hold of the police? Well, I'm going to tell you. Fortunately, I put that part in my slideshow. Okay, so most police officers carry business cards. So one way to do that is, hey, can I have your business card? If your child is going, hey, this is really not going the way that I had hoped it would go as far as the contact with the police, they can always ask, hey, can I get a business card from you? All right? So an officer can give them their business card. It has their name and their contact phone number on it. Okay, that's the easiest. The other thing is, hey, officer, what's your name? Or, I got Henderson stitched on my shirt. All right? So they can either see the name on the name tag, they can ask for the name, they can ask for a business card. Okay? If none of that happens and your kid comes home and goes, hey, I was stopped by the police, I don't know why, this is my story, then your next step should be call West Precinct. Okay, and this is the phone number right here, 360-487-7355. And if, it's a big if, somebody answers, then you ask them, if you have the officer's name, you ask them, hey, how do I get a hold of Marshal Henderson? Okay? They will give you my phone number. If it was me, they'll give you my phone number, which is going to be a voicemail, and then you would call that number, leave a message, ask me to get back to you. All right? And I say it's a big if anybody will answer the phone, because with budget cuts, the time that people answer those phones is not a lot, and then when they are on the phone, they're taking reports, so it can be a very frustrating system. And then that's kind of where we start getting into frustrations with the government and trying to deal and jump through those loopholes. So, what if you don't know the officer's name, you don't have a phone number, okay? Well, then you go back to, you talk to your kid, you found out a time, a location, and then a date. Then you can call 911 and say, hey, my son or daughter was stopped on this date, about this time, in the city of Vancouver. I need to find out what officer that was. 911 dispatch can look that up. Now, a lot of cities operate where you don't call 911 unless it's an emergency. This is not that area. Okay, it's really the only phone number that we have. We don't have non-emergency phone numbers except at the precinct, which are slowly going away. So don't hesitate. You can call 911 and find that information out. If you already have the officer's name, then you just give dispatch, hey, I need to get a hold of Corporal Marshall Henderson. Okay, and they will give you a voicemail, and then you will call and leave a voicemail and ask me to call you back. All right. So you can't figure out the officer, or the officer's not returning your phone call, or you're not satisfied with what the officer's telling you. You can call the sergeant. You can find out, hey, who is Marshall Henderson's sergeant? Okay, you get that information through 911. You get that information through West Precinct, and you can always drive down to West Precinct also and hope that it's open. Do I have till noon? Okay. All right. I'm getting the big hook. But anyway, so now I would suggest when you call a sergeant, already identify why are you calling. Are you calling to be angry and complain, or are you calling because you really want to know what happens? Because a lot of times, like any interaction with people, you're going to get the response that you initiate. You know, it's like, hey, what the hell is going on down there? Why is my son being violated? If you start off that way, you put the person you're talking to on the defense. So again, before you make the call, figure out why you are calling, okay? And if you really want the information, it's best to, stay professional. It's a professional call, just like when you're calling your doctor, and try to work it from that as far as finding out what happened. If the sergeant's probably not going to know what happened out on the street, so say, hey, you know what? I've been trying to get a hold of Corporal Henderson. He's not calling me back. Can you ask him to call me? That should be step number one. Or the sergeant will be like, yeah, I'll tell him to call you. Okay, if I don't call you back, call the sergeant again. And then, you have your complaint as far as, hey, he's not calling me back. I want to know what's going on. Or if you have talked to the officer and the officer tells you the story that you don't necessarily agree with or like, you're free to call the sergeant and say, hey, this officer told me this. I don't really feel right about this. Can you ask the officer about it? Those are all ways that you're going to be able to get an answer. So just like I talked about shortly, a short time ago was, again, this is a professional phone call. You're the parent and you have emotional ties to this, but try to stay unemotional in your phone call. It's a fact-finding mission. You really want to know the truth because your child is involved in something. All right? One thing to keep in mind, it can easily be 2 weeks before an officer gets back to you. It can be a month. We work in a schedule where we have 4 and 5 days off, and if I'm on my cycle where I have 5 days off, then I take 5 days vacation, and then I have 4 days off. Well, that's like 14 days before I ever come back to the office, and then I have 100 emails, and I have 25 voicemails that I have to go through and contact those people and deal with those things. It can be a little while before they get back to you. It's frustrating, but try not to get angry about it and think it's just the police, they're not responding to me. Because, again, factor in all of those things. Or, you know what, maybe I was injured and now I'm going to be off for a little bit. Those kind of things. If you go for a long period of time and you don't get a response, try a couple phone calls. If that doesn't work, feel free to call the sergeant and find out, hey, is Corporal Henderson even working? Those kind of things, okay? You can also call 911 and ask, hey, is Corporal Henderson working? I need to get a hold of him. They'll tell you if I'm working or not, all right? For general questions about, hey, I found this in my son's room. I think he might be, gang affected or might be getting involved in gangs. Or my son's going and hanging out at this house. I think it's a gang house. Or, hey, we have this house in the neighborhood. I think it's a gang house. There's a bunch of red shirted guys going into it all the time. Sergeant Tim Huberty, he's the sergeant of our gang task force. He's a good guy to call. This is his desk number. Call, leave a message, and he will get back to you. He's a good guy to know if you're having any kind of gang issues or your child is gang affected at all, because he can give you tips on how to deal with it. But also, if your son or daughter is gang affected, don't be surprised if the gang team ends up contacting them. So if you know Sergeant Huberty ahead of time, that's a good thing, because you can call him up and say, hey, Sergeant Huberty, some of your guys were out at my house, what's going on? That way you're gonna, get the police side of things, which is hopefully the straight scoop on what's going on. Okay? This is me. If you have questions, you can always feel free to call me. This is my cell phone. I'm so lazy that I don't even like to pick up my voicemail at work, so I don't even give that phone number out. The cell phone's the best way to get a hold of me. I'm happy to answer your questions. If I don't know the answer, I can steer you towards the people, hopefully, that do know the answer. And I'll be here till I have to go to work to answer your questions. So just to end here, so everybody can go and have lunch, it's easy to be upset with people you don't know. I guess what I would equate, law enforcement is a unique profession, because most professions, they're very specific. If you call a plumber, what's a plumber going to come out? He's going to work on your pipes, right? He's not going to side your house, okay? If you call your general practitioner because you have a brain tumor, he's going to say, hey, go to the brain surgeon, and he's going to do surgery on you, right? The police career field is different. I'm expected to go to every single call and be able to deal with everything that happens out there that I'm dispatched to, okay? Now, after that, I can send you off if there is a specialist in that, maybe there's a domestic violence problem. I can refer you over to some specialists. But for the most part, when you're dealing with patrol, you're dealing with guys who have to deal with every single call that comes. They have 15 or 20 calls a night, and they're expected to deal with everything, not be emotional, to be just friendly enough but not overly friendly, to be interested in your problems but then leave your problems and go and deal with 10 or 15 other people's problems on that. So it's a difficult thing to do. I'm not making excuses, but what I am saying is, just like you go to work and some days you have good days and some days you have bad days, you know what, the police are the same. So, again, we go back to communication. A lot of the hard feelings we can overcome if we just communicate and talk to each other. Okay? Enjoy your lunch.
This program is being provided by the 15 members of the Vancouver Educational Telecommunications Consortium, TV, etc.